Stegosaurus, like many other dinosaurs, has been the victim of much splitting, but two species are most commonly recognized. The one we're more familiar with tends to be the Stegosaurus stenops. Ungulatus is the other one. The most obvious difference is in the tail spikes of the 𝘴𝘵𝘦𝘯𝘴. Stenops has 2 pairs, and Ungulatus has 4 pairs, or a total of 8 spikes, as you see here. Seriously now, that rubbish aside, in these skeletals you can see some of the oft-cited differences which will be of interest to us. First, the larger differential between the fore and hind limb lengths, as well as the narrower and more pointed form of the dermal plates in Ungulatus. Stegosaurus, as we know, means roofed lizard, from the Greek stegos, for roof or covering, and the species name Ungulatus comes from the Latin unguis, meaning nail, claw, or hoof. Ungulatus is generally regarded to be larger than stenops, reaching up to 7 meters or 23 feet. Unlike sauropods, it makes sense to use a horizontal length estimate, since that's what's often quoted. And taking an estimate of 7 meters for Stegosaurus ungulatus and a model length of 25 centimeters or 9.8 inches, this model is about 1 to 28 scale. It's about 12.8 centimeters or 5 inches at the highest point. There is a very large specimen dubbed the apex, which is claimed to be 8.2 meters, and I haven't seen verified measurements of this, but using that as a reference, we get 1 to 33, and deplorably, it's going to be lost to science by way of private auction. Like the 𝘴𝘵𝘯𝘴𝘵 and 𝘴𝘵𝘦𝘯𝘴, there are not 2 but 3 color variants. We have the green, the more crazy blue, and the craziest red version. I passed on this. Now I like unusual and creative color choices, but if ever there was a point over which creative colors cross from the sublime into the ridiculous, this is it for me. I decided to get the less crazy blue and green for Stegosaurus. Immediately I have to say that the in-hand models look more subdued than in the release images, so even if you got the crazy one, don't worry, it's still going to be more subtle, and I've actually seen it, it's really quite nice. Still, I think you can see there's a large variety of colors. The green is in general faded very well. In certain lighting, there's almost a brown bias rather than a green impression. And we've talked about the color blue before, so this I got really for novelty and shock value. The colors do fade smoothly, and even in these freaking white squiggles here. So let's get to the detail. Now first in the head, it's got that obvious slender snout. For an idea of the size, here's my trusty almond. If we look at the detail, we see as expected the quality that comes from a Haolonggood sculpt. But where the color of the beak fades in, especially here in the mandible, it just looks wonderful. You'll notice that this is cheekless, an increasingly adopted look since the work of 𝘴𝘵𝘰𝘴𝘴. It's just a simple line. And from the top, you can again appreciate the narrowness of the snout, suggesting a rather picky eater. And you also see the very nice detail. And since the 𝘴𝘶 specimen, we've realized that stegosaurs had longer necks than previously depicted, so this feature isn't as outré as it seemed in Miragaia. The length is captured here, along with what's nowadays that mandatory throat armor, always a welcome opportunity for nice texture. I like how these rows of throat ossicles parallel with these folds in the skin, making a nice pattern almost. The snout to shoulder is packed with detail, and the scales and skin folds and the textures are all clearly elaborated, with a nice layer of color to cap it off. That takes us into the body, and as you know, one of my favorite parts for showcasing level of detail is the shoulder girdle and down. Here indeed you see that very fine detail in scale and skin fold. And then going down, notice the very nice musculature in the bicipital area. And into the forearm, then the hand. The fade of yellow in the posterior aspect into the skin is a nice contrast. The hand of Stegosaurus is interesting, according to some sources to have only 2 unguals, and delightfully this is done here. In terms of musculature and detail, you won't be surprised that the forms are very pleasing. In the body, there seems to be a bit of graininess going on, but it's by no means corn-cobby in size. Detail isn't skimped in any area, and no spot is left bare. There are scattered osteoderms in quite a far-reaching expanse, almost covering the entire side. Of paramount importance are of course the dermal plates, and Haolonggood didn't let us down by putting in some impressive work in their render. Now every sculpt of this dinosaur has given us a different take on the keratinous surface, and this one you can see how the texture breaks out the plates. The cragginess does hint at something organic. There is a very flame-like appearance in the orange going into the yellow, with a dark brown at the base. The whole plate looks like fire. You can see that round where they erupt from the skin, there's a slightly different texture in the scale, which is a nice touch, almost like 𝘴𝘵𝘯𝘴's raised ridges around large osteoderms and such. Then in the hip. The wide hips are known for Stegosaurus, though as we will see later, not quite as wide as with 𝘴𝘵𝘯𝘴's. The detail in the hip area, down the thigh, generally, the colors look naturalistic and nowhere as stark or artificial as they look in some release images. The wrinkling in the knees, the legs, the feet, you see throughout again that this model is replete with skin detail, always nice to see in a model, but especially befitting an important dinosaur like Stegosaurus. And finally, of course, we have to look at the famous Stegosaurus. Here you can see the keratinous nature shine through in the way it's textured. Now, keratinous bits, I find, are an important element that lends realism to a model, and we've seen lazy and sloppy paint apps that just took away from the illusion of reality. The dark brown into the yellow also reminds me a bit of burnished gold, or rather metal. The angulation is also nicely horizontal and functionally more useful than in some older models when they're a lot more upright. Now the other variant. The head is again very nicely sculpted, and there is a reddish hue mixing very nicely into a kind of yellow that, being complementary to blue here, really is a striking mix. The sculpt is of course exactly the same, so in terms of detail, it's equally as intricate and pleasing, and I'll also say a really pleasant tactile experience. The plausibility of so much blue pigment aside, I always like blue, perhaps as accents and maybe not so much vast expanses, and I hope that blue, a very special color, won't become overused and hence cheapened. You can go to the well only so many times before something loses its novelty value, so using it sparingly would be the way to go. We see again that reticulated pattern here, but this time, because of the blue-green color, it reminds me of light on shimmery water, and so it's a very calming effect. I think you can see that once again, Haolonggood really follows up on its previous standards in this model. There are no lazy washes or shortcuts taken. The highly intricate detail and texture just pops out. And together with the colors, the whole thing just sings. The plates again seem to have a flame motif with a red that fades into the yellow. And as we know, Haolonggood has a positive idéfixe on the damn squiggly lines, but here in the plates, at least it's not so starkly applied, and they are rather nicely blended. I think it's just the form of them that I don't like, but maybe it's just me. There's just something a little unnatural about them. Everywhere, of course, you'll be able to see the same detail we saw in the green, and different colors will give you a different feel, of course. So much for this variant. As for the pose, I appreciate models that look good not just from one or even both sides, but from the different angles. You can see there's a sense of movement in 3 dimensions. Elements like the pose on the front limbs, the stride in the hind limbs, and the lift and sway of the tail all come together to breathe life into an otherwise static model. We've come really far from the earliest days of models in representing a living animal and not a caricature. And so now we have the comparisons. Now the first is a no-brainer, each other. Here, because of equal standards in paint application, it really depends on which one you think brings out the detail more, or simply put, which one you prefer. Good thing is we do get a choice, which you don't get in many other offerings. That's one special feature of Haolonggood's offerings that's remained consistent like forever. Overall, and surprisingly, I have to say I prefer the blue, even though the green is more naturalistic looking. Then we look at the PNSO Stegosaurus stenops. And here I think you'll appreciate the differences in the limb length differentials as compared to today's Ungulatus. We can also see clearly the difference in dermal plate morphology. In terms of skin detail, really the PNSO isn't very much ahead of the Haolonggood, and arguably which has better paint apps is subjective. You'll also see that the hips are in fact wider in PNSO. And here now, we have actually my favorite Stegosaurus in traditional colors, which is this 𝘵𝘱𝘴. You really don't get too much more traditional than this. The winner here for me is really the plate morphology, as it seems to borrow much from the sideshow that I loved so much. This is one impressive model, and I still have this as one of the centerpieces on my shelf. Finally, I think it'd be nice to see some of Haolonggood's other stegosaurs. So here we have the Haolonggood-𝘴𝘱𝘴𝘶. And you see those stubborn squiggles again, and more starkly rendered. Then the Haolonggood-𝘴𝘶𝘴. By the way, recently, an old theory has surfaced again, being that Miragaia and 𝘴𝘶𝘴𝘴 are the same animal. Here's the PNSO-𝘴𝘱𝘴𝘴𝑠𝑎urus. And the Safari Sophie, still a very nice model. That's it for the Haolonggood Stegosaurus ungulatus. Except for the scale being too big for 1:35, I'm very happy with this, capturing as it does some of the characteristics nominated as different from stenops. Haolonggood has really added so much to our herbivore selection, and I'm really excited to see what else they come up with. I'm especially excited about the Camarasaurus. it would be pretty cool if they were to come up with a Stegosaurus stenops. In that case, I kinda wouldn't mind if it was a bit bigger than 1:35, just so it scales with this ungulatus better. Now let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next video.